This clip is brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com.
And the next night Raw is taped for the following week, and Steve Williams attacks Al Snow and Bob Holly after their match. And Steve also works with Tiger Ali Singh in a dark match and picks up the win. And then out of nowhere, Steve Williams is released. Meltzer would write, the biggest shock of the list was Williams, who was never really given a chance. Williams, 38, was the top foreign star for All Japan when he was lured away last year with the idea of being an opponent on top for his namesake, Steve Austin. Steve Williams was going to be marketed without a gimmick other than his toughness. The Brawl for All concept was put in place as a shoot, largely as a way for him to get over as a legitimately tough guy and threat for Austin. In hindsight, the idea was a huge miscalculation, since Williams was a very good amateur wrestler and being the only pro wrestler in history to ever be a 4-time NCAA placement winner. But he was never a boxer, and Brawl for All entailed a lot of boxing. He goes on from there, just sort of laying out exactly how this thing got sideways. But the idea is, even now, after that injury, he's still not 100%. And he had that lame Japanese mask gimmick, and they probably had some poor creative and being the protege of Jim Ross and all of that. But now that Jim Ross is back at the broadcast booth, Meltzer would write, quote, it left Williams with no spot. Word has it that Vince McMahon was fairly insistent on Williams having no future with the company, since the WWF is so heavily based on looks and acting ability. While Williams is probably still one of the strongest men in the company, he doesn't have a pretty physique, and he is a notoriously poor talker. Plus, his in-ring style is quite a bit tougher from the Japan background than the company's used to, and it's not flashy by American standards. So a lot to unpack here, but it came down to, as you heard from the very beginning of the recap from the Observer, the biggest shock on the list. For years and years, it's become, I guess, a changing of the guard of sorts after WrestleMania, and Dr. Death finds himself lumped in here. Do you recall, Vince McMahon's opinion? I mean, the word here is Vince was fairly insistent on Williams having no future with the company. Can you agree, disagree? How does this come to be?
Well, I think that it was more of a cost-cutting thing, and I wasn't involved. So I just think it was cost-cutting and looking at the upside. And I don't think there was a whole lot of upside at that point.
Unfortunately, JR is the guy who has to make the call, and it doesn't go well. It's going to draw a wedge between their relationship. Why was the creative changed so quickly? Is it because Jim Ross wanted to do commentary again, and you realize, well, that idea won't work now either?
Well, yeah, because you've got, look, Jim wasn't happy doing it. Doc wasn't happy doing it, I don't think, even though I think Doc would have done anything we asked him to do. So it becomes a battle, and at that point, you just kind of got to cut bait and move on.
Here's something that, I don't think we've discussed at all. Did the company feel like Dr. Death was just too beat up at this point to handle the WWF schedule? I only asked because in my research, I don't think he ever worked a house show. He had dark matches, and he had matches at the training camp, but I think he only worked 3 dark matches, 2 matches at the camp, 2 Brawl for All matches, and 2 TV matches. So it's one of the biggest signings that the WWF had in that year, where people were really excited about, hey, what is this going to be? And it amounts to almost nothing. It feels like
I do think Doc worked more house shows, live events than that. Because we had him out there just trying to get his legs under him for a little while, and maybe not advertise, but yeah, I'm sure he worked more than that, but at the same time, he never got out of the gate.
Right.
And so to do anything beyond that in any significant role was almost impossible.
It's so crazy to think about how brief his real run is. And we're still talking about it to this day. Do you think in hindsight, he's one of the great sort of what ifs of the WWF?
Yes, I do. I think that had Steve Williams come in under a different presentation, that, yeah, he definitely could have had a hell of a run.
It's fascinating to dig into this. He said in his autobiography and interviews afterwards that, his release was his refusal to go to FMW as requested by the WWF, because he had a long-standing relationship with All Japan. So let me just catch everybody up. FMW is sort of the ECW of Japan. There's All Japan, there's New Japan. Maybe you could say that's WWF and WCW. Some people are chuckling at that. But then there is an FMW, which is sort of the more hardcore ECW-esque presentation. But you guys had a pretty good working relationship at this point with FMW, and you were even having Vader and Shamrock do stuff over there occasionally. Do you remember this discussion of, hey, we need you to go do FMW, and him just flat refusing to go?
I don't. I really don't. We did have a good relationship with FMW through Victor Quinones. Had a good relationship with Victor. I don't want to say we had this great relationship with Onita. It just was business and happenstance more than anything. But I really don't remember if that was the case or not. It may have been, but I don't remember because I could see that happening, saying, hey, there are people that want him. Maybe we can book him out.
So you believe, and I've always been led to believe that the release is your idea. It's not his idea. And it almost feels like sometimes it was inferred, well, I didn't do the FMW thing. And it feels open-ended, but clearly it's a release that neither he or Jim Ross is happy about.
I would believe so. Yeah.
So after he's released, while he's still got this hamstring issue, you guys give him permission, I assume, to work the Giant Baba Memorial Show. I say after he's released because he's still technically under contract. You guys wouldn't have had a problem with him working a memorial show. Y'all let that happen all the time, right?
Yeah, it wouldn't have been a problem.
So he goes on a radio show in November of 99 and claims that Triple H and Steve Austin, their angle with Jim Ross in October, was originally scheduled to be the same angle as to how he was going to start his feud with Steve Austin. Is that just wrestler talk, or do you remember that being originally discussed?
I don't ever remember that being discussed.
He also said in another radio interview that the goal was for him to begin his push when SmackDown launched on UPN. Did you ever hear that, or is this rumor and innuendo?
That would be rumor and innuendo.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.